Hello and welcome to episode 70 of Pixel Sift. My name is Gianni and joining me this week are my co-hosts Mitch and Scott. Guys, thanks for coming back for another week for 70 episodes in a row now.
I like your shirt.
Hello.
Bright and yellow and wearing the Pixel Sift colours. If this is your first Pixel Sift, each fortnight we tackle the topics and issues that are making the news in gaming. And we talk to people from the Australian and New Zealand games industry to kind of find out why they do what they do. This week we're joined by Dr Jennifer Hazel. She's one of the co-founders of the gaming mental health organisation Checkpoint. Jen, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
We're looking forward to hearing all about what you have been working on. We're going to draw on your expertise in games and mental health throughout this episode today. But we're going to be chatting about some other stuff as well. In the middle, we'll be talking about your crowdfunded video series that's coming up. But first up, Mitch, what are we checking out today?
Yes, I'll be taking a closer look at game addiction. Why do some of us have trouble putting down the controller?
And lastly, we'll be talking developer burnout. Is it possible to be too committed to your project?
I think we all know the answer to that, but right now let's jump straight in.
You're listening to Pixel Sift, or you might be watching Pixel Sift on Twitch. Pixel Sift.
I miss James.
James is in the background, obviously, for people who generally don't get to hear him. Go on. What are we talking about today, Mitch?
So, other than James, we're all passionate about games. Every person in this room can admit to spending hours in the grip of our favorite digital pastime. But what some people have trouble pulling away. So, I've been fortunate enough to never really suffer from this at all. But I have been very committed to a game recently. That's Horizon Zero Dawn, which I just platinumed. But I thought I'd throw to you, Jen. What do you think is the telltale sign that someone is addicted to games?
There's a few diagnostic criteria that are kind of being thrown around now, and most of them are about how much time is being spent not using the game in general, but how much time is spent using it when they're supposed to be doing something else. So we call it how functional that person's being. Are they contributing in the way that they're used to? Are they going to work? Are they having a shower? Are they doing all those kind of basic life things that you would expect from someone? And if one part of that is lacking, then you could think, well, perhaps their priorities are warped in a way that they're not able to function anymore.
So can you be a functional gamer versus a non-functional gamer?
Yep. That's the beauty of it, is that you can play for 100 hours a week if you want, but as long as you're doing everything else that you're supposed to do. I don't think that would be difficult because there's not really 100 extra hours in the week after work, but as long as you're doing everything else you're supposed to do, and as long as you're fulfilling all of your kind of areas of well-being socially and psychologically and physically, like you're still getting exercise and you're happy and you're seeing your friends and your family, you can play as much as you want. It's all about balance.
One of the things I really remember, personally from my perspective, I think that I have quite a focused, and I will become very I'll become obsessed with particular things. And one of the things that I remember was when a game called Battlefield 1943 came out, and it was just it's a multiplayer shooter, very much like the rest of the Battlefield series. But I was kind of competing with my friend who was probably a little bit better than me, and I was spending sort of crazy amounts of time in order to kind of beat him. And I actually luckily had a moment where my friends kind of said, hey, you've got to step away from the game now because you're playing too much, and let's go do something else. Unfortunately, they took me to go see the first G.I. Joe movie, so that really felt like it was a waste of time. But, there was that moment where it was kind of like it became quite clear that I was spending too much time doing this particular thing. And I remember in high school as well, when the GTA series came out, playing Vice City, I spent many days. Actually, I would basically come home from school, play until the morning, and then go to school again, and then do that. I did that for about 3 days in a row until the point where I got to, it was like some afternoon, I couldn't do anything, had completely not slept for about 36 hours or something to that effect, and I just couldn't remember getting home. I just remember being in bed at one point, and I thought, no, that's enough. Let's put that away now and go from there. So I think it's really valuable, and Jen, I'm hoping you can kind of give us a bit more things about a bit more information about how to sort of break these cycles if it seems like people can acknowledge that they're having an issue with playing too many games. Whether you think like friends and family is a good way to kind of have that bar and say whether we're doing too much or if it's okay.
I think it's the same as any form of addiction, really, is that sometimes you'll be able to recognise it and sometimes not, but being aware of the signs is really important, and also being aware of the gaming addiction specific signs and addiction specific signs. So like if someone calls you out on it, do you get annoyed? Do you feel guilty about how much you play? Do you feel that you're kind of craving it during other parts of your life and you're not enjoying other things as much? And being aware of those things is really important, and kind of checking in with yourself. But at the end of the day, adults have to be autonomous, and we all have to take responsibility for our own issues.
One of the things I wanted to sort of check with you is that a lot of games are sort of designed for this quick, repetitive gameplay loop where they can encourage people to come back as many times as possible. And do you think game developers sort of have a responsibility to make sure that they aren't creating something that is too repetitive, too addictive, ticking that box too much? Or do you think it is a personal responsibility sort of issue?
Do you think that the people who make alcohol are responsible for the people who get addicted to alcohol?
Good point.
Same with cigarettes. So there is an obligation to educate, I think, but ultimately the responsibility for that is on the player. And I think the difficult question there is not just whether is it the game that they're playing, it's why are they playing it as well. So somebody could be having a really beneficial time playing one game, whereas someone else would get addicted to it. And whose responsibility is that? It's a tough one to say. I think that the line is drawn when games are being designed specifically to be addictive so that they can exploit the player. That's a different thing completely. Well,
alcohol and cigarettes, for example, have legislation to kind of protect people who are sort of perceived to be at risk. Do you think that we sort of need governments to step in? Is this something that as this industry develops, that maybe people should be taking a look at what that actually means for people in these sort of, I guess, more susceptible groups?
They are. It's already happening.
What sort of things can you kind of?
Well, we can diagnose gaming addiction. There's treatment clinics. We're doing research into how you can measure that and what treatments are available. It's something that that it's already happening.
But do you think we need to have some sort of warning package on your app store saying that this thing may
may be dangerous,
yeah. or
consume responsibly?
There are already, it's called parental controls. But beyond that, we would need evidence to suggest that something on the App Store could be addictive. Otherwise, it's just kind of scaremongering, Think about how it took centuries for people to realise that we needed to put labels on alcohol. Same with, most things that are addictive that aren't illegal. Yeah. The legislation has to match the risk, and the risk at the moment is very, very low.
I saw a couple of recent studies concerning the ties between video game addiction and depression, and there was quite an alarming correlation between the two. I think they were published in the journal Pediatrics and the Archives of Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine. And the problem I think there is, I see this, and Jen, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that in that situation, addiction in video games could be hiding their other undiagnosed issues. Personally, and for me, I have used video games plenty in my time to fill holes in my life and happiness even. It's easy to sit down and kind of tune out for a bit, especially with online friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's the same with quite a lot of behaviours. A lot of coping mechanisms are due to something that's underlying, and again, there's something that we need to do a lot more research on about the comorbidity of gaming addiction versus other mental health issues that are happening simultaneously, and what's the chicken and what's the egg.
could these now the games are more social, could that be helping break people of the game addiction, or could it be contributing to the fact that they are getting a very social experience online, you're not really looking for it offline, that kind of thing?
What do you mean, like, now?
As in, since games have become more social, people are kind of getting their social needs filled online instead of going outside and doing that.
Games have always been social.
I was in as in the last 10 years, they've become much more connected, and with
the state and rise of the quality of the internet and speeds and computers, etc. Online multiplayer games have come a lot more prominent, I guess, in the last 15 years, I guess is what you're trying to get at, compared to the single player games of 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, I mean, well, we disagree there, because games were originally designed to be multiplayer.
Sure.
When you say 20, 30 years ago, that's not even... that's post-NES.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, way back in the day.
Yeah, playing, text-based
for
stuff.
two, games were designed to be a social experience. But beyond that, I know what you're saying. You're talking about the
yeah, I was thinking in turn of online. Yeah, I guess I was not being very...
The majority of the research that's already happened has been about MMOs and specifically Warcraft, and it depends what the bias of the researcher is by the looks of things. So there's been evidence to suggest that the friendships and relationships that you make online can be as fulfilling as those that you have in real life. But then there's also research to suggest that people are not developing important social skills because they're preferencing one over the other. I don't know that if there's one answer to that question. It's a big topic.
Well, look, there's plenty of things to discuss here, and I guess obviously, a lot of opinions out there about different levels of game addiction and where this sort of thing can kind of occur, whether it's a problem, whether it's not, exactly where someone becomes, a functional gamer, or if it becomes an abnormal behaviour. But right now, let's jump into our next topic.
Did you know PixelSift is available on other platforms? You can find previous episodes on iTunes, Pocket Casts, YouTube, and on the PixelSift website.
So if you just joined us, we're joined by Dr Jennifer Hazel, who is one of the co-founders of Checkpoint, which is a gaming mental health organisation. Jen, if people haven't heard of Checkpoint before, it's kind of hard if you're in the Australian games industry, because it seems like you're involved with lots of great projects and lots of great things. What is it, and why were you sort of prompted to start this charity?
It's a non-profit organisation that connects mental health resources with video games and technology. And it started because I saw that there was a need that wasn't being met in the local industry, and every time we talked about mental health in a public forum, people were all for it. The support was so significant, and it was something that clearly wasn't being looked after in this community. So we decided to fill that gap and do what wasn't yet being done.
Was there a particular case that you observed that really drove you into action to create such an organisation?
No. No, I loved games. So,
yep.
And my job was as a psychiatrist. So every time I spoke about my job in gaming communities, it was, just so well received that it made me realise, well, what if I could have a life where I combine the two things I love most? And now that's what I do. So I'm really lucky.
Obviously, there's been a big need for this sort of thing. The reason why you're having, you're running a crowdfunding campaign at the moment, Kickstarter, it's growing quite well. What are some of the sort of, things that we should be thinking about as gamers in terms of mental health that you'd love to sort of, clear up some of the misinformation on? Or as game developers, what are some of the things that you'd like to see sort of good practices for good mental health if you're making games?
In terms of developers' representation of mental illness and in terms of the consumers of the games, not believing everything you see in a game is really important. I do talks all over the world about the representation of certain mental illnesses, particularly psychotic illnesses, because it's just so grossly inaccurate in the vast majority of games and is perpetuating a really significant stigma. And I'd love to see that improved because it would assist the lives of people everywhere.
We got a couple of questions from people viewing. So basically, Limbot wants to know, online games are a source of comfort, but it's no secret they are often a place of hostility. Do you think that this might change, or what might change it?
This isn't a question for a mental health person, I think. It's more of a sociological phenomenon, you know? Like people get these topics mixed up a lot, like the whole mental health, therefore that's why people are mean thing. But I think there's something else completely going on there about the power of anonymity and hiding behind a computer screen and what makes people say things like that in the first place. And I think that's what needs to be addressed.
All right, no worries. I'll try and I'll pick one. I'll pick a different one. Limbot also asks. So just did my bit for the Checkpoint Kickstarter. How have you found the process so far in Kickstarter in organising something like this?
What specifically about it?
Oh, I guess they might be wondering are there pros and cons for doing this non-traditional method of funding that you found personally?
It's a lot of work. I've dedicated my life to it full time for a long time. But it's also really lovely to see the support of the community simultaneously, so it's definitely worth it.
Cool.
Jen, one of the things that I was watching your talk that you did at Play by Play.
Yeah, sure.
You were talking about some of the issues with people who are quite often especially in the Australian scene, where there isn't. There's sort of a mix between a mid-indie to sort of semi-professional to professional, but it's not quite like the American scene, for example. There is this sort of passion that people put into their projects. Your talk at Play by Play was all about avoiding crunch and burning out and making sure that you can kind of balance out your work so that you can kind of do that. Do you think that is this just is that something that as developers kind of get further down the path and become more experienced at this sort of project management will become easy to sort of manage, or is this something that you see all over the world in every sort of industry and every level of industry?
It's specifically in games.
Well, I'm just talking about in terms of like people who are working in a passion project and, are pouring their heart and soul into it and maintaining a life balance that is healthy. And
Oh, well, I only work in games. I work in an inpatient unit in a hospital as my full-time job. So I only see the local community there. And then other than that, I work in games. But within the gaming community, yes, it's everywhere. And I think it's a cultural thing because it's quite a new industry and because it's very labour-intensive and because it's making a lot of money. So the people who want that money are forcing the people who make the games to achieve things that sometimes isn't really feasible. And like all of the other industries that have gone through a cultural change to try and stamp out crunch, this is something that the games industry will slowly, I hope, learn to adopt much better practices to keep their teams safe and well. So
why did you decide to go for a video series? I know you've been doing a number of articles on the website, done some profiles on some characters in games. What is it about video you think that would help you get your sort of message across, and why did you decide to put that together?
I talk all over the world. I spoke at GDC this year. I was the keynote at Indiecade, Game U in LA last year. And every time I do this talk, I have so many people say that they wish that they could have seen it or that it helped them in some way. And given that gaming and the gaming community is so present online, and given that our entire mission statement at Checkpoint is let's connect mental health resources with technology, I figured what would be a better solution to that than making a web series so that anyone could consume it at any time, any place, in a way that they wanted at their own pace, and it would connect them with the resources that they needed without any pressure on them. I think that's what the community needs is that understanding and those resources that are available to them, as opposed to them having to go out and get them, which traditionally there's a lot more steps to it, particularly in games when no one talks about this stuff anyway.
How has the sort of conversation changed since you started working with Checkpoint, and to sort of the feel and the conversations that people are having now about games and mental health?
There's more of it, which is always lovely. It's really nice to be at that stage where 2 years ago there was one panel at PAX Oz once about mental health, and then there was a long period where every panel in the country at any convention about mental health had me on it. And now those conversations are happening independently of Checkpoint's input, and I think that that's wonderful that people are starting to talk about this more and more and more and more, because that's the power, that's what's going to change things.
Have you found that the games industry is, I guess, are they quite good at talking about this sort of thing? I know mental illness is something that, or even, it's something that is generally not hugely spoken about in sort of Western cultures. Is it better and worse, or is it similar? How is the games industry kind of taken to this?
Wait, what was that we don't talk about mental health in Western culture?
Well, I mean...
Is that what you said?
No, I'm just saying it's people talking about mental health. Speaking from my own experience, one of my immediate family members, for example, had a mental illness, and for a long time I felt quite a stigma about talking about that. Mm. And I'm just wondering if is it something that you've found that gaming as an industry is kind of set up for, because there is a lot of collaboration and a lot of online collaboration between different game developers around the world. Do you think they're in a good position to kind of make some good strides in this area?
I think that games are incredibly influential, that they're a highly consumed medium that has powers to strongly affect the way that people think and feel and the way that people behave around each other, and that therefore they're the perfect medium to actually talk about and educate about these issues and even treat them. That they've got an enormous potential. Like, in their very nature, they're motivating. They're designed to be motivating. So in their design, they are a medium that can communicate and teach and treat.
What are some of your favourite games that address mental illness well?
Life is Strange is really good at doing it.
Oh, I like Life is Strange very much.
Yeah, I mean, it just... What I really love about it is how much of a non-issue it makes it, in terms of, like, it's a part of everyday life, and it broaches those issues so sensitively when they come up. It's really powerful, that game. And there's a few games that have been made specifically to kind of almost like often as a catharsis for the developer, and I think they're really good at communicating how people have experienced certain conditions to one another. So Papo and Yo was really cool, and there's a few others that are quite similar to that. We write articles on Checkpoint about games that are useful for or feature mental health in some way.
I remember playing through Zoe Quinn's Depression Quest as well, and that was sort of a very interesting way to kind of experience someone's personal sort of journey, something very interesting. Now, Jen, if people want to find out a bit more about the Kickstarter that you're currently running, and if they want to get involved and help you out, where's the best place for them to find out more information?
You could go to checkpoint.org.au, and there's a landing page with the link to the Kickstarter right there. I could read out the URL to the Kickstarter, but you'd be very bored because it's quite long.
You can find a link.
It's called the Checkpoint series.
If this Kickstarter kind of, it's on trend to do very well to reach its goal, what sort of things would you like to sort of expand it out into? Where would you like to take it further, and what other things would you like to tackle?
We're looking to take over the world, really. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. It would be great if we could do more than 16 episodes of the web series and get even more people from the industry involved and contributing their stories. We're looking to develop therapeutic games. We're currently doing research, which I would encourage the audience to participate in. You can go, again, on the Checkpoint homepage. There's a landing page that sends you straight to the research. So we're just kind of sitting at that space between mental health and games and doing everything we can to promote positive well-being while simultaneously promoting the beneficial use of games.
Well, look, we've kind of run out of time today, so we're not going to have much of a chance to talk about third topic, which is kind of talking about the sort of crunch, but we did kind of touch on it slightly there. There's a really good video that you can watch from the play-by-play, which goes through all of the sort of symptomatic and the productivity and economic reasons why crunch and developer burnout is a bad thing.
So, Jen, before we finish off, before we go, what are some other resources other than your website that people can explore that would help them out with mental illness that you might suggest?
I think Reach Out Australia is one of the best resources. We collaborate with them quite closely and they're amazing. We also work with Headspace, which is a mindfulness meditation app. And we have subscription keys that we can give to people who need them. So please do get in touch if you feel like you'd benefit from one of those.
There's also, if you're battling addiction, turntohelp.com.au and also Beyond Blue if you're struggling to cope.
Good things there.
Very good resources.
We'll put up links to that on our website, which is www.pixelsift.com.au. Scott, we have a bunch of other episodes as well. We've got 69 of them.
That we do. You can find them at facebook.com/pixelsift, twitter.com/pixelsift, twitch.tv/pixelsift, and youtube.com/pixelsiftau.
And Mitch, you can find us on social media as well, can't you?
Yep, so you can also go to our website as well, and you can also find out about... No, I forgot where we are. So yeah, we have Facebook and a website, Twitter, and all that fun stuff.
RSS link on our page.
And the RSS link on our page. And we go live every fortnight.
That's it.
So we will be putting up all the links to Checkpoint. You can get on there and back the Kickstarter as well.
Absolutely.
Dr. Jen Hazel, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your insight into this and looking forward to the video series coming up.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen.
And thank you for everybody viewing on Twitch. Thank you for your questions. I'm sorry I didn't really get to all of them.
See you then.
Bye.